Talk about, though, the Home Office. You don't want to take your kids there either because they don't know what they're doing. They've overspent by some ridiculous amount of money that you will not believe. £7.6 billion is the overspend that they've spent on asylum support, it's called, basically dealing with illegal migrants, presumably housing them, giving them food, giving them passports, giving them all sorts of things that obviously were meant to cost £320 million and ended up costing £7.9 billion. It's a study by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and we've got Ben Zaranko, Senior Research Economist for the IFS, to tell us all about it. Ben, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
This is quite a stupendous overspend, isn't it? I was saying to somebody earlier in the show that, you know, if this was a normal company, say, and you had 300 million or so as a budget, by the time you'd got to 500 million, you think somebody would have gone, hang on a minute, this seems to be going a bit wrong. But they didn't stop at 500 million, they didn't stop at 1 billion. They didn't stop at 2 billion. I mean, what's going on there? They somehow managed to spend nearly £98 billion on something that was meant to cost 300 million.
Yeah, it's not good. I think you can have some sympathy given that in any single year, it's hard to know precisely how many asylum seekers will try and reach the UK, and it's quite an unpredictable item of spending. But for this to happen, not just 1 year, not just 2 years, but 3 or 4 years in a row, I think something's clearly going wrong. And the sums involved are very big. I think the strangest thing for me is that every year the Home Office submits these budgets to Parliament. It says, here's how much cash we're going to need. And the Home Office itself admits, we don't think this will be enough. We're going to have to get more cash later in the year. And yet these are all signed off year after year. And we go through this charade. And the reason why it matters, it might seem arcane, but the reason why it matters is Rachel Reeves has come in and said, actually, there's this big hole in the spending plans for this year. We've got £22 billion of pressures. Asylum's a big one of those. So when she's making decisions about things like winter fuel payments, this is a contributing factor that's led her to that place.
Yeah, exactly right. But also, I mean, I get the fact that you may be talking about something which is a bit unpredictable. You don't know exactly how many people are going to come, but you've got a reasonable figure. You've got a, you know, in every job that I've ever done, and particularly if it was involving, you know, having to run a department or something like that, you know, you are given a budget, or you submit a budget for what you would want for the next year, and you get it closer than they did. I mean, you know, one thing is to you know, to get it wrong by a little bit. You could have started with 5 billion and end up spending 7. You know, that's not so bad. But to only start with 300 million and then spend so much money, I mean, whoever made that sort of estimation should be out of a job, shouldn't they?
I think there's lots to criticise, and the Home Affairs Committee in Parliament, so a committee of MPs, has been complaining about this for some time, in writing to the Home Office and basically telling them off. Yeah. And yet they've persisted in doing this. And I do think it raises big questions. I think the problem is they've been relying on these, you know, emergency top-ups to their budget from the Treasury, from this fund that's set aside supposedly for emergencies. But this isn't an unpredictable emergency. It's happened every year for the past 3 or 4 years. No, exactly. You should learn from your mistakes, and we should be setting money aside in advance for those things, leaving the emergency fund, the reserve, for genuine emergencies.
Right. And presumably an awful lot of the money is eaten up by the £8 million or so a day that is spent on housing these illegal migrants.
Yes, that's one big reason why spending has shot up. So there's 2 things going on here. The first is the number of people claiming asylum in the UK last year was about 67,000 people, about twice the level in 2019 when it was about 36,000. So there's about twice as many people coming here, but then we're also spending more per asylum seeker. Big reason for that is that we've got about 16 times more people in hotels than we did previously. So we're basically, we're not managing this very efficiently. We're not keeping a lid on costs very well. No. And I think there's some big lessons that should be learned going forward.
And I've got a feeling that they keep the statistics separate as well, because I think the 76,000 figure for asylum seekers, if I'm not mistaken, is the number who came legally through legal routes, because they're counted as part of the net migration. And I remember looking at statistics, and 76,000 was the number for those people who had come here under other means and then sought asylum. For example, maybe come on a student visa, or maybe came on a work visa and then wanted to claim asylum. So they don't actually count the illegal migrants, which have now counted up to more than 6,000 since Keir Starmer came in to be Prime Minister. So, I mean, the 120,000, for example, who are waiting for their processing of their asylum claims, I don't think they're counted in that 76,000 number, if you know what I mean.
I'm not an expert on all of the ins and outs and specifics of the system. I can tell you know more than I do. I think there's 2 points I would make. One is that it's not just about how many asylum seekers come, it's also about how quickly you process them. The longer it takes to process people, the longer you have to house them and support them. They're not able to work. And the second thing is, whether it's 70,000 or a little bit higher, that's quite small compared to the big picture number of how many people are coming through other routes, things like student visas, things like health and social care route for visas. Those numbers are much bigger. This is only a small portion of overall net migration.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive problem. So, I mean, as far as you know, and I don't know whether you do know the answer to this, are any heads going to roll at the Home Office over this? I mean, it seems like such a massive overspend. You do wonder whether they've got other parts of their other parts of their sort of structure that are also making these kind of mistakes.
Well, interestingly enough, Jeremy Hunt wrote to the Cabinet Secretary after Rachel Reeves unveiled her spending audit in July. He effectively said, why are civil servants signing off on these budgets which they know aren't sufficient? They're not their best forecasts. Right. And it's a good question. I think another question for Jeremy Hunt is, this happened last year and the year before that when he was Chancellor. So if he wanted to fix it, he could have done so while he was in power. Right. But I think there's an ongoing investigation. What comes out of that, I don't know. But I think that we should definitely, at a minimum, be improving this going forward so we don't find ourselves in this mess again.
No, absolutely. Well, we know that it was John Reid, when he was the last Labour Home Secretary, called the Home Office not fit for purpose all the way back in, I think, 2009-10, you know, and it's obviously got worse.
I think in a budgetary sense, there's clearly not some bad practice going on, and I don't know what the solution to that is, but it's clearly not to continue as we are. No,
exactly right. Well, it's a great report anyway. Well done. Thank you very much indeed. Ben Zaranko, their Senior Research Economist at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, on that ridiculous overspend. Imagine setting aside, even if you think about it in terms of not billions and millions, setting aside 300 quid and then finding that actually you ended up spending 20 times more than that. So it would be like 6,000 instead of 300 for a holiday or something. Ridiculous, isn't it?